Hello. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining my live. First of all, let me apologize for the sound. As you can tell, if you're a regular viewer, we're using a slightly different location today. And let me know if I have to raise my voice, but it's such a beautiful location. And I thought this was just a great avenue, just a great place to stay and talk with you guys tonight. So please let me know if I need to lift my voice up or if you're struggling with sound, let me know. But I'm so glad that you're joining us today. My name is Dr. Sylvia, and this is AskAwayHealth, where we talk about everything health related. And of course, as you can tell from the title, today we're talking about breast cancer risks and what we can do to reduce breast cancer risk, particularly for women over the age of 40. So if this is what you're interested in, you're very much welcome. We're going to get straight into it because I'm hoping not to keep you guys for too long, and I'm hoping that we can take any questions as well that you might have. But yeah, let me know where you're watching from as well. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know. Yeah, somebody says the sound is fine. Yeah, let me know how your week has been. And yeah, happy holidays as well. Hope you're having a good break if you're not working over the Easter holidays. And if you're celebrating, happy resurrection, happy blessed resurrection. Okay, guys, let's get into it. We're talking about breast cancer risks. And I have got a lot of information to get through, and I'm going to be referring to my notes. So just in case I'm looking away from the camera, I'm looking at my notes. But yeah, it's really important that we're talking about this and continue to raise awareness. And I'm going to share with you some facts and figures, I think, to get us started in the first instance, so that we can see why it's important to talk about this. Do I have some impromptu guests? Or I have some people just going past. Yes, I think it's really important to talk about these. So let me just share my screen with you, and then we look at some of the risks that people can have with breast cancer. So let us see. Bear with me a second. I've got lots of files open. So let me just close all my extra files. And there's that one. Guys, I'm filming tonight from the city of Marsaxlokk in Malta. It is beautiful, beautiful environment. It is lovely. It's a bit cool now. We're literally just like one step. If I walk 10 steps, I'll be right inside the Mediterranean Sea. That's how amazing it is. And so, guys, this is fantastic. So I've got lots of people walking around. There are restaurants, and you know, other people's houses just around the location where I'm sitting. So you're going to hear lots of noise from time to time. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. Okay, so let me just double check that I have everything closed that I need to close, and then let me share my screen with you. Give me a moment. So what are we doing? So okay, so we're looking at breast cancer UK site. You're looking at facts and figures. Please let me know where you're watching from. That'd be really great. Yeah, so you can see me. And yeah, so we're looking at breast cancer facts and figures. I'm just going to go through a few of them, but I highly recommend this website, breastcanceruk.org.uk. Yeah, and the reason I do is because it's got so much information, lots of research, particularly current research around risk factors for breast cancer. What are the new things that we're finding? Really useful information. So if you're looking, and it's got a really great quiz that you can do and find out your personal risk. Because it's one thing to talk about it. We've all got different medical backgrounds, different family histories. So it's really important, if you really want to look at your own risk, check out this website. It's really good, really useful. Okay, so in terms of global breast cancer statistics, let's look at the global, then let's look at the UK. I hope you can see my screen. So it says in 2020, 11.7%, so nearly 12% of all cancers diagnosed were female breast cancer, making it the most common cancer worldwide. In 2020, there were 2.26 million women diagnosed with breast cancer, and 685,000 lost their lives. As of the end of 2020, there were 7.8 million women alive who were diagnosed with breast cancer over the past 5 years. And let's not leave out men. I know we're talking about women tonight, but men also get breast cancer. And in 2019, there were 25,100 men diagnosed with breast cancer. In terms of the UK statistics, if you scroll down, let me just pick one or two. It says there are around 56,000 new cases of breast cancer every year. That's over 150 cases every day. Okay, so let me just stop there, because I just wanted to give us a taste of the statistics, and so why we're talking about this, why we're looking at this subject in particular, is because it's so common. Okay, common as cancer in women. There's big impact globally in the UK and globally. So it's something that, as a woman or as the brother, friend, sister of a woman, daughter, mom, whichever, it's of interest to everyone. We should know about this condition. So what is breast cancer? Breast cancer is simply when you have abnormal cells that form inside the breast, and they begin to grow and divide in an uncontrolled manner. That's what cancer is. But of course, when it happens in the breast, it's breast cancer. So why are we looking at women's breast cancer risks after 40 years? Now, it doesn't mean that women who are under 40 years will not get breast cancer, because they do. But breast cancer, and indeed most cancers, are more common the older we get. I know you can have childhood cancers, yes, but in terms of cancer itself, and breast cancer specifically, it tends to happen more often as you go older, particularly after the age of 50. So around the age of 40, going up to 50, many of the risk factors, the things that, particularly the ones that we can prevent, are sort of established, or at least they've gotten to a proportion where they could cause serious problems. So these are women who are approaching menopause, and some of us may experience difficult symptoms of menopause and have to change our lifestyle. So this is also a good time to think about your risks, particularly if it's not something that you've been doing when you were younger, if you've not really put it in mind. If you're around the age of 40, going to 42, 45, and so on, this is a good time to think about your risk. So let's just dive into it. The first one I want to talk about is, let me just pull up, because I've split it into different sections so that we've talked about breast cancer statistics. So the first one is know your family history. Know your family history. Now, I know you're saying to me, know my family history. How is this going to help me reduce my risk? I get it. Now, with breast cancer, and with generally cancers, there are some factors that you can't do anything about, while there are some that you can do something about. We call them modifiable. But the important thing about knowing your family history is that it allows you to prepare yourself. So if you know that you have a family history of breast cancer, then there are certain things that you can do ahead of time, ahead of the time when you may possibly develop it, that may help you to reduce the chance of actually getting it. So the awareness is what's important here, because of course you can't change your family history. So women with a family history of breast cancer are at a higher risk. So it's essential that you're aware. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you have a family history. Now, what do I mean by family history? It means that you are at a higher risk of developing a condition, in this case, breast cancer, than the general population, because somebody else in your family has had it or has breast cancer. Okay, so that's what family history means. And particularly having a mother, a sister, a daughter who's diagnosed with breast cancer increases the risk of you having breast cancer. The risk is also higher where you have more than one close relatives who have breast cancer, or if somebody in the family developed breast cancer while they were under the age of 50. Now, all these are research findings. And remember that when we say risk of something happening, it means that the tendency or the possibility is there. It may not always happen. So that, of course, means that it's not in every family where a mother has breast cancer that their sister, daughter, and so on will go on to have it. But in terms of the studies that have been conducted, we've seen an increased risk or association in that kind of scenario. So let's just put it in context, please. And it's important to say many women who have close relatives with breast cancer, they don't develop cancer. So please bear it in mind. The reason I bring it up here is because it's important for awareness sake. And when you're aware, you start thinking, right, what can I do to reduce my risk further? What steps can I take? And so on. That's the purpose. That's why it's important to know. The other issue that's related to this in terms of family or inheritance is that some people have an increased risk of developing breast cancer because they have what we call faulty genes. They've inherited faulty genes. So you might have heard of this, that there are several gene faults in the DNA or the chromosome makeup. There are several types of genes that could affect the risk of developing breast cancer. And for some of them, we have tests to identify them. And having a faulty gene means that you're more likely to get breast cancer than someone who does not have that gene. That's what it implies. But it's not always a certainty. So there may be other things associated. There may be other things in the environment, or maybe something to do with other aspects of your medical history that affect you in addition to having the faulty gene. Now, two of the ones that we know about, the more common ones we know about, and which you might have heard on the news, are known as the BRCA1 or BRCA2. So BRCA1 and BRCA2, we call them BRCA1, BRCA2. They are rare, okay, but according to Cancer Research UK, 2 out of every 100 or 2% of breast cancers are related to a change that is affecting the BRCA1 or BRCA2 genes. So it's a tiny percent, but it is there. It's important to note, okay? So that is as much as I would say about your family history. All right, so guys, we're talking about risks for breast cancer. We're doing that in the context of women over the age of 40. And I'm hoping that if anyone has questions on this subject, please send a question related to this subject or a comment. That would be really great. So next, let's talk about the next thing that you can do to help to reduce your risk of breast cancer after 40. And it is maintain a healthy weight. Now, being overweight or being obese are both risk factors for breast cancer, particularly after menopause. Now, I know you're going to ask me what's the difference. The recommended BMI, particularly around the world, but in the UK where I practice and where I teach, we recommend between 18.5 to 24.9 as the normal BMI. And it's important to have it in context. Some people have small frames, some people have big frames, some people have large bones, and so on. And if you're ever stuck and wondering whether you're the healthy weight for your age and your height and so on, speak to a doctor so they can look at all the parameters that we would consider. But roughly, if your BMI is between 18.5 and 24.9, that's considered normal. Being overweight is when your BMI is over 25 and less than 30. That's overweight. And being obese is when your BMI is above 30. Those two conditions, both being overweight and being obese, are associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. So the thing is that's important is consider what you eat and drink, consider how active you are. Let's be very, very clear about this, that being fat, overweight, obese, whatever you want to call it, does have health implications. Let's not be political about this. Let's not try and be woke about this and because we want to accept a person for their size, not say what the truth is, which is that there are certain health conditions that can happen or that are increased risk of happening because of our weight, especially if the weight is excessive. So it's important to say, I wanted to get that across, okay? So let us look at the next risk factor, which is related. It is about staying physically active. And we're talking about breast cancer risks, particularly after the age of 40. And I just wanted to remind you, I'm just looking for my banner, to please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We've been on for 15 minutes, and this is the first time I'm asking you to like and subscribe. Guys, please show some support. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. So we're talking about staying physically active. I'm just going through my notes because I want to make sure I don't forget. There are quite a few I've listed. I want to make sure I get through all of them. Now, what is it about exercise? We're told that regular exercise helps to reduce your risk of breast cancer. And what we're told from science is that 30 minutes of moderate physical activity, now that might be brisk walking or jogging, running, swimming, most days of the week, 5 days of the week recommended, can help to reduce your risk. Now, apart from helping to reduce the risk of breast cancer, being physically active also has other health benefits, helps you to maintain a healthy weight, and also is associated with reduced inflammation, which could, in terms of studies, could contribute to those abnormal cells I talked about at the beginning growing. So exercise does have its value, its benefits in terms of keeping you healthy, feeling good and looking good, but also helping to maintain a good weight. We've just talked about being overweight a few seconds ago. And the recommendation is that if you can do about 150 minutes of moderate physical activity, gardening, whatever you like to do, keep active, decide that you want to. And I know it's difficult for us women, particularly around and after the menopause, where it's difficult to shift weight, but it is one of the things that we do consider as being important. Take some time to be active, find something that you're interested in doing, something that you can commit to, and something that you would enjoy doing. So it's not like a chore, because it's important that you stick to it. It's got to be something that becomes part of you as a routine and a lifestyle that you want to maintain. So this is what we recommend. Okay. So we've just talked about exercise and weight. Let's go on to the next one, which is alcohol. Big one. Alcohol. Now, alcohol intake is important. Alcohol can affect so many different conditions, so many different things. Let's talk about how it affects breast cancer. Drinking alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer. Okay, so the recommendation is either that you stop, and especially if you already have a high risk of breast cancer. So you might have a family history, for example, and what you're trying to do now with that knowledge is reduce other risks that might push you even higher. One of the things that you can do is stop out taking alcohol. It is thought that that risk increases with every extra unit of alcohol that you take. So if you're having a glass of wine, for example, it depends on the size of the glass, of course, but you're talking about maybe between 1.5 to 2.5 units, okay? So that's one glass of wine, okay? So just use that as an average. You shouldn't have more than one of that per day. And the recommendation in the UK is not more than 14 units, 4 units per week, male or female. So if you can stick with that recommendation, not go above that, better still, stop, completely cut down, take alcohol out of your system. If not, then stick to the recommended daily allowance or weekly allowance. Now, of course, the alcohol content is different for different types of alcohol, beer, spirits, wine, different sizes. So if you're somebody who does drink, even on a social occasion, there are lots of different apps and websites where you can actually quickly check the quantity, the type of alcohol and the quantity of units that you're consuming, so that you're guided on what you're doing. And this is what really this is about. It's about getting the information that we need to make the right decisions, so that way, we don't get to a point where we're doing things carelessly. That's the purpose of this. Okay, so we're going quickly to the next one, and it is about smoking. So this is about don't smoke. There's still a few studies that are not very conclusive about this, but smoking is a known risk factor for many types of cancer, including breast cancer. And this study suggests that people who start smoking at a younger age, at an earlier age, are more likely to be affected, so they have a higher risk of breast cancer. But of course, smoking can harm your health overall. You know, it's associated with, or it's linked to other health conditions like heart disease and so on. So you're better off, particularly if you are interested in reducing your risk way down as much as you can, or if you already have other risk factors, stop smoking. You can't say it's fairer than that, okay? All right, so the next one. This is another of the funny ones. You're going to say to me, over 40, why am I talking about breastfeeding? That's why I put a question mark there, because again, it's one of those ones that you want information, you want to be informed about. So let's have a look at breastfeeding. What we know is that if you breastfed, or if you're pregnant at 40, as is possible, and you intend to breastfeed, if you do so for between 6 months to a year, or even more than a year, you have a lower risk of developing breast cancer. That's what we know, okay? The other thing that we are aware of is that if you have kids under the age of 30, your risk of breast cancer is lower. So if you're sitting there thinking you're 42 or you're 45 or 48 or whatever, and then you think back to how old you were when you first had your kids, that might give you an indication and sort of help put yourself on the spectrum. But the thing about it is, we're all different. Some people might have a particular risk factor, while some other people have a different risk factor. So we're not really putting people on a percentage likelihood of getting breast cancer or not. We're saying to you as an individual, look at your lifestyle, look at your medical history. And if you're somebody, for example, who started having kids a little bit older, that may give you a slightly higher risk. That does not mean that you're going to end up with breast cancer. It's just saying that in terms of studies, when they've looked at these kind of numbers, they found a higher risk. And what you should do with this information is think, okay, what else can I do that I can change? Because you can't go back 10, 20 years to make any changes about when you breastfed, of course. But perhaps there are things that you could do now. We've just talked about smoking. We've just talked about alcohol. We've just talked about weight and physical activity. So there are a few things that you can do in order to address that. So yeah, breastfeeding your children for at least 6 months. If you're pregnant now and you're in your early 40s and you're pregnant, late 30s, for example, and you're pregnant, breastfeeding your children for at least 6 months reduces your breast cancer risk. And the longer you breastfeed, the better. So for some of us who actually breastfed until I think it was 18 months before my daughter came off the breast, that gives you a better that improves your risk. That is, it reduces your risk of developing breast cancer. And if you're, like I said, if you're having children at the age of 40 and you decide you want to breastfeed them and breastfeed them for longer, you still get that benefit. Okay. So what is the next one? The next one is looking at mammograms. If you're just joining, hi, welcome. I see a couple of people have joined the stream. Thank you so much. It would be lovely to know you, where you're watching from. I'm taking questions or comments related to this topic. We're looking at breast cancer risk factors after 40 and what we can do to reduce them. And we're just trying to dash through my long list here. And we're right now talking about mammograms. So a mammogram is a special type of X-ray. I'm just going through my notes, bear with me. So a mammogram is a special type of X-ray. It helps to detect breast cancer early, so it helps to identify changes in the breast tissue early when it's most treatable. And guys, this is really important. It's about identifying breast cancer early, because then there's a fighting chance, there's a very good chance. And that's why I want to talk about these risks, and some of the things that we'll look at in a few minutes also address the importance of identifying it early. So a mammogram is an imaging test that uses low-dose X-rays to create images of breast tissue. And if you've ever had a mammogram, then you know what they do is they've got two plates, metal plates, and then the breast is gently compressed in between those plates. And that's to help to spread the breast tissue so they can actually see if there are any abnormalities. That's how they do a mammogram. and then they do the x-ray. Now it's possible, like I said, it's best for detecting early cancers, and it is possible that the mammogram may miss some cancers, especially in women who have dense breast tissue. Keep note of that term. I'm going to come back to what is dense breast tissue. But if the mammogram misses such cancers, then your doctor would also request for things like a breast ultrasound or breast MRI. So if you've ever complained about the lump, for example, here in the UK, if a woman comes and we suspect that she might have a breast lump, she's referred to the breast clinic. Amongst the tests that she would have is the mammogram. And if they're not really happy or they think they've not really seen anything, they go ahead to do an ultrasound scan, and they may request an MRI. So how often should you have a mammogram? Now, some countries have special programs, screening programs, like the UK where I train. We've got the NHS breast screening program, and our recommendation at the moment is that women between the ages of 50 and 70 are offered a mammogram every 3 years. That's how we do it here in the United Kingdom. After the age of 70, a woman can still have her mammogram. She's still entitled to have it on the NHS. That is free. She just has to request it. In other countries, for example, the US, when I looked this up, apparently the American Cancer Society recommends that women with an average risk, so the same as the general population, not a high risk, women with an average risk of breast cancer begin having yearly mammograms at age 45. And they should continue having yearly mammograms until they're 54, at which point they switch to every 2 years, or they can continue with their yearly mammogram. So slightly different to the way that we do things in the UK. Now, if a woman has a higher risk of breast cancer, we don't want to wait for her to do it every 3 years or do it every 2 years or whatever. If she has a higher risk of breast cancer, for example, she's got a family history, or we know she's got certain faulty genes, we just talked about them a few moments ago, she may have to start screening earlier and have more frequent mammograms or other screening tests to monitor. So that is that about mammograms. And while we are on the subject of extra screening tests, let us go to the other. So this is, what should a woman do if she's got a high risk or she's worried about having a high risk of breast cancer? I'm going to talk to you about that. So there are other screening tests. We've just looked at a mammogram, which is a screening test. But there are other things that a woman who is at a high risk might need or might have. One of them, the first one, is to have a breast exam by a doctor, an experienced healthcare practitioner. And that's usually where it starts. So it might be that the woman observes something on her breast. So she might observe something on her breasts or feel a lump when she's having a bath or a shower, and then she comes to see the doctor, and then she has a breast examination. So the breast exam is a physical examination of the breast tissue by a doctor or a healthcare practitioner, and you can have that in addition to the mammogram and all the other tests, but it's usually where it starts, okay? The other type of screening is a breast MRI. I've just mentioned that MRI is a magnetic resonance imaging test. It uses a magnetic field and radio waves to create detailed images of breast tissue so that you can see any abnormal changes. And of course, it is more sensitive than the mammogram, and it might be recommended if a woman has a high risk of breast cancer. Again, like somebody who has a family history or somebody who has faulty genes. The next screening test is a breast ultrasound, and the ultrasound uses sound waves to create pictures of the breast tissue. Again, if a woman has dense tissue where it is more difficult to see the breast because she's got dense tissue, then she would have a breast ultrasound scan. And another screening test is genetic testing. So this is if you have several relatives who are developing breast cancer or some type of cancer, then it might be recommended for you to go and have genetic testing so that they can look at are there any faulty genes that are running in the family. So that will be something useful for people who have a strong family history of breast cancer or other types of cancer. The other one is the breast self-exam. Really important that women please examine your breasts. Get used to feeling your breasts. Usually, if you're before menopause, the best time is usually After you've had your period, you can do that while you're having a bath or in the shower or just lying down. Feel your breasts. Now, we're not asking you to try and identify any lumps. We're just trying to ask you to get used to how your breasts feel. And if you just choose a time of the month, maybe once a month, and you just do that, and you're just trying to get used to feeling what is normal, so that if at any point you feel something that's not normal, you quickly pick that up and come to your doctor as soon as possible. Please don't be afraid about what it could be or not, because the earlier we get it's detected, the better. Okay, the earlier, and that's why we say examine, check your breast regularly, and don't be scared if you find something. Yes, I know it is scary. When I say don't be scared, I mean please come forward quickly, because many times it may not be anything. There are other things that could cause lumps or changes in the breast that are not necessarily breast cancer. But if you feel something and you sit on it and you're worried about it and you're not coming quickly about it, then that delay is not very good. Okay, so we're moving on quickly to the very next one, which is about radiation exposure. And if you're just joining, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming in. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for everyone who's done that already. We're looking at the very next one, which is, let me just bring this up because I want to make sure that we're talking about radiation exposure. Now, high doses of radiation can increase breast cancer risk. I'm sure that you're aware of that. That's not news, okay? So the important thing is about reducing or limiting the exposure whenever possible. What instances can you, as an ordinary person going about your business, become exposed to radiation? Commonly is when you're having tests like x-rays. We just finished talking about mammograms, but bear in mind that mammograms deliver very low dose volume of radiation or low intensity amounts of radiation. So the exposure there is very low. Or if you're having chest x-rays or other things that happen in the course of receiving healthcare treatment, and your doctors are aware of the risk, and we will not want to expose you to any test that you do not particularly need. Okay, so you could also be exposed to radiation in medical treatment for people who, for example, need to have radiotherapy to treat certain types of cancer. So here's one example. For if somebody has left breast cancer on the left breast and they need radiotherapy, they may be exposed, or their right breast, because the radiotherapy is going to be directed towards the chest. There's a possibility that they may get radiation to the right breast. So that's another way that somebody could get exposure to radiation. And so bearing that in mind, the decision has to be, can we bear the risk of possible exposure of the right breast versus not having treatment for the left, or an alternative treatment that's not radiation for the left breast cancer that actually exists? So there is that kind of, decision that you need to weigh, that you need to decide. What other ways could you get exposed? It depends on the environment. If you live near mining operations or sites contaminated with radiation, if you work in areas where there is nuclear power, if you're working in radiology departments, some types of manufacturing. So these are possible ways that you could get exposed to radiation that might increase the risk of developing breast cancer. Generally is low. It's low generally. But if you do have a family history of breast cancer or you have other risk factors, it's important to be aware of this and discuss your concerns with your doctor. Like I said, we're talking about raising awareness. That's what's important. And just knowing that these risks exist can be useful for many people going forward. All right, so the next one is limit hormone therapy. I know this is a big one that many people want to talk about. So what is hormone therapy? What does it look like over the age of 40? Well, of course, we're talking about HRT, aren't we? Because we can use HRT to manage some menopause symptoms, and we know that can increase breast cancer risk. So we need to think about it in context. And I'm going to share with you a very useful infogram that I share with my patients when talking about the risk of breast cancer and different lifestyle scenarios, some of which we've talked about, and I'm going to share that with you at the end of this. So there is a slight increased risk of developing breast cancer in a woman who is using HRT. We have two main types of HRT. There is the estrogen only type, and there's the combined type. We find that the risk is actually higher for those who are using the combined HRT. Now, the risk is also greater for somebody the longer she's on the HRT. So using the combined is a higher risk. Using it for a longer period of time gives a higher risk of breast cancer, which is why, as doctors, we always try to start you on the smallest possible dose and keep you on it only for as long as you ever need it, and then take it away when you no longer need it. Because when you stop taking HRT, for some years after, we say about 10 years after taking HRT, your risk goes down completely to what it is for everybody else around you who's never used HRT. So it's really important to make a note of that, so that HRT can be of great benefit to many women. Some women suffer really distressing menopause symptoms with either hot flashes or vaginal dryness, or so many different things that HRT can help. Plus, HRT also has some other benefits. It can help to protect the bones. It can help to reduce the risk of dementia. It can even protect against certain heart problems. It helps with sleep. It helps with sex drive, overall health. So some women find a lot of good things with HRT, and you might say it's unfair to allow them not to get those benefits because you're afraid of breast cancer. And I use that term guardedly because, yes, there is a small increased risk which you must know about so you can make your decision. And if you have a family history, you have other risks, then of course I wouldn't be recommending it. We always have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis, being aware of the risks and then considering what your own personal needs are is how we make the judgment. Okay, I know we're talking about over 40, but let's just briefly touch the pill. Many women who use the pill, they're in their late teens, 20s and early 30s. I know that some ladies might still use the pill into their 40s. Some can and some wish to, although at that point we're looking at alternatives. But then a recent study came out, I think it was just last month, saying what we pretty much knew, that not just the combined pill, but the progesterone-only pill and other progesterone birth control also have an increased risk of breast cancer. We knew that. It's not a new thing. So in terms of taking the pill, you're making a decision as to what is best for you. So yes, so there's a slightly increased risk, but we've already said that breast cancer is rare in younger women. So the chances of a younger woman having breast cancer because she's on the pill is slightly increased, but it's a lot less compared to an older woman. Again, it is subject to each individual woman's decision. Okay. And those who have a high risk, of course, should be advised or should think about those other risks, and if they want to add the risk of taking the pill to the risk they already have. So what we say, though, is by the time you stop taking it, these risks generally apply to when you're using these medicines, whether it's HRT or the birth control pill or birth control method. By the time you stop taking these birth control or using these devices, by 2 to 10 years, your risk of having breast cancer has come down. So when you're taking it, there's a slightly increased risk. By the time you stop taking it, the risk starts to go down till within a period of 2 to 10 years. In some studies, it's 2 years, the risk has come down, but many studies indicate that by 10 years, any woman who had been taking the pill or using HRT, her risk of having breast cancer has reduced to pretty much the same as every other person around her who did not use any of those methods. So, guys, I think we're nearly halfway through. I told you that there was a lot to go through, but I really wanted to have all of this in one video. And afterwards, I'm going to break it down. So anybody watching on the replay, I'm going to put the different sections and you can just go straight to the area that you want to talk about. So the next that we're going to be discussing is about a healthy diet. I know I talked about weight and I talked about physical activity. And I just pushed this down a little bit to the bottom because I wanted to still have this in your head about all these components of healthy living. So the impact of food and diet is so important, okay? In terms of studies, it's a bit tricky to analyze because we eat different types of foods. If it was a perfect kind of study where you have those that only eat fatty foods or saturated fat all the time, and then you have those that only eat healthy foods and all that all the time, then you can make some reasonable comparisons. We don't generally have that. So sometimes to be able to make firm conclusions with studies is a bit difficult, but we do know that a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein helps to reduce the risk of cancer. Add more fruit and vegetable. Fruit and vegetable is always good. A mix of red, yellow, orange fruit, non-starchy vegetables. These are all good because they're high in carotenoids, and we think that this helps to fight inflammation. Some lines of thought are that the abnormal cells that start dividing in an abnormal fashion and cause cancer happen because of inflammatory processes going on in the body, because we still don't know exactly why this thing happens. We know about risk of developing cancer, but why in particular it happens, we're still light on that information. So eat your vegetables, green leafy vegetables like spinach and broccoli, all types of vegetables, that is good. On the other hand, processed meat like sausages and bacon, cut them down or cut them out. If you can, cut down on red meat as well, cut it down. Yes, I know my suya lovers, I love suya too, but health always wins. Not saying that you should completely abandon it. If you can't, you might just have it occasionally or rarely, but listen to what the International Agency for Research on Cancer says. They classify red meat as a possible carcinogen. Carcinogen is something that could trigger the development of cancer. So let's just be aware of that. So some studies have found that eating a lot of red meat increases your risk of breast cancer, especially before menopause. So if you want to reduce your breast cancer risk, eat less red meat. Now, the other question I wanted to tackle was, is there any special diet that can reduce your risk of breast cancer, like keto, for example, which everybody loves, or intermittent fasting? And the answer to that is not particularly. The key thing that the diet is doing is, one, helps get you to a healthy weight, which we talked about a few minutes ago. But a healthy diet also gives you a lot more of the supplements and nutrients that are antioxidants and can help to reduce inflammation. So if you are on a diet that helps to do that in some form or the other, whatever the type of diet it is, then that's fine. And a diet that you can sustain, so it's something that you can stick to, whether it's keto or intermittent fasting or whatever eating plan that you decide to adopt, that looks at moderate intake of food, lots of healthy vegetables, whole grain, and so on, that you can stick to, then that is healthy, and that should give you the goal of reducing your risk of cancer. Okay, the next one that we're talking about is how to manage stress. So what does stress have to do with breast cancer? I can hear you asking. At the age of 40 plus, we have responsibilities, we've got families, we've got work, we've got parents and kids to look after. There's a lot going on. I'm not saying that my teens and my 20s and 30-year-olds don't have stress. I'm just saying that in the scheme of things, as you grow older and responsibility piles on, then stress can pile on as well. And having chronic stress can weaken the immune system and increase inflammation, which we think contributes to cancer risk. So the key thing is look at healthy ways to manage your stress, and they can include exercise. We've talked about that already. So another benefit of exercise is reducing stress. Meditation, therapy if you need it. It's just important to know that if you're under stress and you don't do anything about it, you're not helping matters, you're not helping yourself. And some people talk about mental breakdown, they talk about burnout and all that. Consider there could also be the physical impact like breast cancer. Just be aware of this. I can't say that we found specific direct causes because, of course, we don't know a cause, but it is important that in terms of studies, we've looked at the possible effect of chronic stress on individuals, and it can cause physical illness. So think about self-care days, incorporating self-care days into your routine, bringing yourself out of toxic, stressful situations or relationships or jobs. Holidays, like I'm on holiday now. I have a busy job. I have lots of things going on at work as a doctor, as a teacher, and intentionally decide to draw back and just come away from the usual pace. It might just be for a couple of days, it might be for a week, but just that break to help to recharge. That's important if you can, when you can do it. Think about sharing responsibility. Don't do it all. If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's important to speak up. Why are you feeling as if there's so much on your shoulders? Can you share that responsibility? Plan ahead. Planning things helps to avoid situations where everything seems like it's just going to pile. If you're doing exams, or if you have particular goals or targets that you want to achieve, are you planning how you're going to achieve those things? Are you breaking them down into little chunks that you can accomplish easier, and not putting so much pressure on yourself? And let's not take away the impact of family, our friends, and socializing. So important. All right, guys, thank you so much. If you're just joining, we're talking about reducing breast cancer risks after 40 in women. We've identified that many women are exposed to certain risks that can increase their risk, or certain factors that can increase their risk of developing breast cancer. What can you do about them? It's much more than just talking about having a pink ribbon, which is fine for raising awareness, absolutely. But what can you do? What practical changes can you make? And if you're just joining, please don't forget to like this video. Also, if you're watching on the replay, kindly like and consider subscribing. Drop your comments down below for me. So we're talking about chemicals and environmental factors. Let me just pull up my notes. Now, there is a lot involved in this one, okay? What do I mean? So let me start with things like cosmetics and cleaning products, okay? Now, you need to know what goes into your body and onto your body. So what you're eating and what you're rubbing. Because many of these everyday products, like our cosmetics, contain, I'm just going to put this up for you because I wrote it out so that you can see it on the screen. Yes, many of these everyday products contain what we call endocrine disrupting chemicals, okay? And there are examples there like parabens, phthalates, triclosan, bisphenols. I've put them there on the screen so that you can see them, how they're spelled, and look for them. Look on the packaging of whatever you're buying, whatever moisturizers or creams that you're buying, whatever new products that you're buying. And this could, if you're updating your cosmetics, if you're buying new fresh creams or whatever, please check for their ingredients. Check for parabens, phthalates, or triclosan. Check the small print at the back, and make sure you're not buying anything that contains any of those products. A lot of the time, particularly in countries like the UK or the US or Canada, these products are being phased out because there's a lot of awareness. In other countries, the regulations are not so strict. So please be aware of these things and make sure that you're doing something about them. The next thing about environmental factors is increased night light. Increased night light. This is for my people that work night shifts. Like me, I do a lot of night shifts. Not as much as I used to, but I do night shifts. Now, increased light at night can increase slightly your risk of breast cancer. And we think it's because it reduces the amount of melatonin. That's the hormone that's associated with our body clock. And that can increase the cancer risk. So it's something to think about. It's something to think about. If you've already got a family history, or you've already got other risks, do you need to continue doing night shifts? Can you switch? Is it possible? At the end of the day, the important thing is to cut down on exposure to night lights and get a good night's sleep, which having a good night's sleep or having a good sleep habit, it is good for any health condition. In fact, if I were to be asked about the key determinants of health, sleep has to be on the list. I think it's very much underrated. The next thing is organic solvents. So these are for people who work with organic solvents, things like benzene or ethylene glycol that's used in antifreeze. They may increase the risk of breast cancer, particularly with long-term exposure. So just be aware if you're working with organic solvents, and it may be from inhaling or using them in paint and all that, just be aware that there may be an increased risk with organic solvents. Where you live, we're talking about environmental factors now that could increase the risk of breast cancer. Where you live, pollution. It is said that living in an urban environment like a city or a large town increases the risk of breast cancer compared to if you're living in a rural village. One reason is air pollution. And the other thing is that if wherever you happen to be, try to avoid pollution hotspots for more than short periods of time, like main roads during rush hours. And just keep an eye, if you're in a country or environment where these things are monitored, keep an eye on pollution levels, either on weather channels or weather apps and so on. But just be mindful about where you live and how that environment could contribute to your risk of breast cancer. And lastly, on this particular section about chemicals and environment is sunlight and vitamin D. Sunlight is good. Sunlight is good. Sunlight is good. It's the best way to get vitamin D, which is essential for so many different things in your body. Okay. However, we also have studies that tell us that low vitamin D levels can increase your risk of breast cancer. So it's good to be outdoors, it's good to be active, and even in for those of us who live in parts of the world where it can get very cold, but try not to spend too much time in the sun to protect your skin from skin cancer. So we're talking about a balance. It's good to be out in the sun, get vitamin D. Don't overexpose yourself because of the risk of skin cancer. Let's bear that in mind. Right, guys, we've gone through many of these factors are things that you can change. You can decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I started with those because we're talking about what you can do to reduce the risk. But I want to quickly go through some of those things that you cannot do anything about before we finish, okay? For example, your breast type. Your breast type. So let me just get this on. Let me take this off. So now we're talking about breast types. And if you stuck with me from the very beginning, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I hope you're finding this useful. Let me know in the comment section. If you've got any questions or comments, please share them with me as well. Okay, so we're talking about breast types. And I said I was going to refer to this earlier. I talked about dense breasts. So breasts come in all shapes and sizes. Does the type of breast you have make you more at risk of cancer? Well, first of all, the breasts are made of different types of tissue. We've got glandular tissue, fatty tissue, the ducts where milk flows. A woman's breast is usually quite dense when she's young, and it becomes less dense as we grow older. But genetically, some women have more dense breasts. That is, they have less fat than others. So some women, regardless of their age and all that, have breasts that are more dense. And if a woman has more dense breasts, she's more at risk of developing breast cancer, according to studies. So just to bear that in mind, you might have a mammogram and they say, oh, you've got dense breast, so we can't really see. Don't panic about it. It's just your nature. It's just genetic. There are other tests that they can do. We've talked about MRI. We've talked about ultrasound. So it's not a problem. They can actually look. And so what's important then is about making sure you keep checking your breasts yourself. You take all the steps we've talked about, reducing your risk in terms of diet and activity, cutting out alcohol, cutting out smoking, the different chemicals and so on. So all those things can help to reduce your risks. The other thing that I wanted to quickly remind you of is the timing of periods starting and stopping. And again, this is not something that you're going to do anything about after the age of 40. Whatever age you are, you cannot do anything about when your periods start and stop naturally. But be aware, just know, having early periods, that is before the age of 12, or stopping your periods late after the age of 55, allows your body to be exposed to more estrogen, and we think that increases the risk of breast cancer. Next, so we just talked about timing of the periods. I've said what I want to say about that one. But I just want to have that so I can use that. Oh, this slide just went on. That's useful. Okay. I said all that so that I can know where to put my time mark for this particular one. So the issue about your periods starting early and your menopause starting late is that you're exposed to more estrogen. Okay. So the very next one, let me get a drink. It feels like I've been talking for ages. Okay, so let's go to sex hormones. That's the very next one. And this is just for the awareness about how these hormones can affect breast cancer. The sex hormones are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Their levels can increase a woman's risk of breast cancer. Usually, women, we have small amounts of testosterone. But after menopause, some women, your estrogen levels are supposed to go down, but some women might end up with higher than expected levels of estrogen around that time, and higher levels of testosterone, and that may increase their risk of cancer. Just something to be aware of. Again, it's not something that we might be able to change like some of the other factors that we've talked about. But just be aware that this could be a particular impact um, of these sex hormones. And also for women who, before menopause, women who have high testosterone levels before they reach menopause, also have been found to have a higher risk of breast cancer. Okay, so that is about sex hormones. The next factor I wanted us to talk about is ethnicity. And ethnicity in this instance, from large studies, there is a suggestion that white women, Caucasian women, are at a higher risk of breast cancer than other ethnic groups. And the thoughts about why that could happen, the reason why that could happen, has been attributed to lifestyle factors. I think a lot more study needs to be done in this particular area. What lifestyle factors and are other ethnic groups underrepresented in those studies, just so that we can get more detail. But according to that study, in terms of ethnicity, the group that's leading in terms of highest risk of breast cancer is white or Caucasian women. And next, let us look at previous cancer. So this is important. And again, it's one of those things that you can't particularly change. But it does make sense that if somebody has had cancer previously, that they are at a higher risk of getting cancer again. So previous cancer might be cancer in one breast, and then it comes back in the same breast or in the other breast. In which case, anyone who's had cancer needs strict monitoring, regular monitoring for either the cancer coming back in the same side or developing in the other side. But there are other conditions, other types of cancer where there may be an increased risk of breast cancer developing, for example, melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer, bowel cancer, bone cancer. Have I got that right? I beg your pardon. So, womb cancer, sorry, not bone cancer, womb cancer, and a type of chronic leukemia. So, womb cancer, melanoma, lung cancer, bowel cancer, and a type of chronic leukemia. Those types of cancers happening, individuals that have those types of cancers may develop breast cancer. Not all the time, but there is that possibility and that awareness. So something that their doctors should be aware of. Okay, and this one is the last one I was going to finish us off or with is height. What on earth does my height have to do with cancer? That's the beauty of studies. You look at different things and it sort of we put some idea to them. We don't know exactly why, but studies suggest that women who are taller than average have a slightly increased risk of breast cancer after menopause. We don't know why. They think it might be due to different hormone levels. I've just finished talking about sex hormones and testosterone being higher in women can contribute to cancer. Is it that women who are taller than average have more testosterone? We still need those studies. So that's still going on. But that's something just to be aware of, just to think about. And by no means does it mean that women who are above 6 feet or 6 feet 2, that all of them will develop cancer. Certainly not. It's just reporting that this is some observation that has been found in different studies. And then I said I was going to end on that one. And actually, I was telling you a lie because I do have one more before I let you go. And this is about whether or not you have children. So does having children increase or reduce your risk of cancer? Now, this is something that for many of us is out of our control. Some people can choose that they don't want to have kids, but for some people, they can't have children. So you can say that this is one of those things that is out of our control, that we can't particularly change. But women with children have a slightly lower risk than women who do not have children. Okay, now this risk goes even lower. Okay, the risk of developing cancer is even lower the more children that you have. And the age when you have your first child also has an effect. Like I said at the beginning, that the younger you are when you have your first child, the lower your risk. So the childbearing or having children does have an effect. Now, does it mean that a woman who's not had children, or women who haven't had children, will go on to develop breast cancer? No, there are no absolutes here. None of these risk factors are absolutes. They just give us an indication. And they suggest to us that this may be a contributing factor, but it doesn't happen in everyone. So it means that it's not this alone that contributes or causes cancer. We don't know what causes breast cancer. We just know that there are enough studies that have demonstrated to us some relationship, some risk, and that if we want to help ourselves, we can reduce those risks as much as we can. Like I've mentioned at the beginning, as much as we can to reduce those, and they may help us be less likely to develop breast cancer. Okay, before I let you go, let me share my screen one more time and show you that graphic I promised I was going to share with you. So sorry about the noise from that car, but we are nearly done. Oh gosh, is it here or is it not here? Oh yes, it's here. Now let me show you. Okay, so hopefully you should be seeing this graphic. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. So this is a graphic I love to share because it's so easy to pick out the information. You don't have to talk too much. So this is understanding the risks of breast cancer. It's a graphic developed by British Menopause Society. And it compares the different lifestyle risk factors versus hormone replacement therapy, HRT, which we've already discussed. Okay, now this first one here, 23 cases of breast cancer. So this is looking at the UK general population, women over the age of 50, and you have 23 people women developing breast cancer. If you have a group of women, 1,000 women who are then placed on combined HRT, an additional 4 will develop breast cancer. Remember, I told you that we have two main types of HRT, combined and hormone replacement, and estrogen only. And the cancer risk is higher in those who are taking the combined HRT. Well, this is how it's demonstrated in this graphic because whereas you have an additional 4 cases in women on combined HRT, for women who are on estrogen only HRT, the number of cases of cancer, breast cancer, actually reduces here. Okay. Now, for women who are on the combined contraceptive pill, they have an additional 4 cases. So that's in addition to we're starting with the baseline. The baseline is always these ones at the top here, where my cursor is. But then let's look at other lifestyle things. Lifestyle, it's not just taking the pill and HRT. What about if you're taking alcohol? Can you see what happens? Can you see an additional 5 cases? Okay, out of those 1,000 women, if they drink 2 or more units of alcohol per day, then 28 of them are likely to develop breast cancer. Remember what I said about drinking alcohol at the beginning? And then look at smoking. Now, in those 1,000 women, if they were smoking, then you have an additional 3. So instead of 23, 26 of them will develop breast cancer, okay, in women who are smoking. And what did we say about weight, being overweight or being obese? Okay, where the BMI is greater than 30, or overweight where the BMI is greater than 25 but less than 30. Can you see this is even the biggest increase? 24 additional women, okay, will develop breast cancer if you have that group from 1,000 women who are overweight. And lastly, look at exercise at the bottom. You have 7 fewer cases. So exercise is protective. If you're taking in your 2.5 hours, which is 150 minutes of exercise per week, 30 minutes, 5 days a week, you actually reduce the risk of breast cancer is reduced. So look, I love sharing. I love sharing that particular graphic because it's so much easier. It's so much easier for my patients to see, to understand the risk, to put it into context about making that decision when it comes to whether or not you want to use HRT. So guys, I will place the link as well in the description box. I definitely recommend go and check out the Let's that website again, Breast Cancer UK. I'll place the link in the description box for you as well. Guys, it's taking us an hour. I'm sorry it's been so long. I'm trying to run away from lengthy live streams, and from next time we'll go back to what as normal. But there was such a lot to cover here, and I wanted it in the same place so that you can refer to it and check. And I'm going to put as many resources, and don't forget you can ask, okay? Many times I will not do consultations on YouTube. That's just not feasible. It's better to be able to have a forum where we can get as much information to find out what it is that's going on and then help you. So you can go to my website, AskAwayHealth.org, and use our email health information service. That will also be linked in the description box below. And it is a paid service, and your contributions and donations and payments that you make all go straight back into the website, helping us do the work that we do, supporting as many people as possible to get the best healthcare possible as much as we can online. So all that is much appreciated. And if you have a question around this subject or anything else, please feel free to use that resource to send a question in. But otherwise, if you've got a comment on this or any other type of videos or health topics you want to see on our live streams going forward, please do share them. I'm going to say thank you so much for watching, for joining me this evening from a chilly but lovely, lovely environment in Malta, where I am on my holidays. And next week, back to life as usual, back in the clinic. But yeah, it's been a great one. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a blessed and happy resurrection, to as many of us that are celebrating this special time of resurrection, and to everyone else, happy holidays. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. Just before I go, thank you so much, Abby Mates. I'm glad you found it useful. Thank you. Bye-bye.